Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
While we could all agree culture is not a business metric, if it's not properly constructed and properly seeding the environment, you will notice every aspect of a bad culture in every line item in your P&L.
Welcome to the 5th season of the Woodworking Network podcast and a new episode. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by FDMC Magazine. My guest is Bob Stonehill, General Manager of Fixture World in Baxter, Tennessee, and author of a book on constructive culture. But first, I want to talk about building a team for positive change. One of the most interesting experiences in my career came when I was hired for a new management position and was told on my first day on the job that I would probably want to fire 2 members of my team. Now, I've never been one of those my way or the highway kind of guys. I believe in working with people to make them more productive. Sometimes in the process, I learn that my way might not be the best way, and that knowledge typically benefits the organization. So with 2 allegedly problem members of the team, I started paying closer attention to what they were doing, how they were doing it, and any complaints or suggestions that they had. I'm proud to say those 2 people soon became the most productive team members I had. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way. I've had to fire a number of employees over the years. It's not fun, but sometimes you have to help somebody find a job that's a better fit for them rather than letting them slow down or even sabotage the efforts of your team. This situation is even more critical if you are trying to make significant changes in your operation, such as introducing lean manufacturing methods or adopting new manufacturing processes and products. It gets old really fast to hear people repeat, "We don't do it that way." But what can you do about the folks offering friction, other than to just let them go? 2 things I've found that most times work is to first try to listen to their complaints and suggestions. Second is to set up change that can be empirically measured. It's awfully hard to argue with change that can be measured with math and data. Are we producing more good parts in less time with the new method? Are we meeting deadlines and delivering work on time? Even something so subjective as quality can often be measured. Are there fewer returns or reworks? Are customers willing to pay more for a better product? Or is the supposed increased quality just overproducing and not really adding customer perceived value to the product? Often people are like a fussy edge bander. It takes just the right combination of adjustments to make it work smoothly. Then when you change the different edge banding or different substrates, you need to adjust again. People need just the right combination of inputs too. I firmly believe that it's worth the time to try to make those adjustments until the whole team is working smoothly. I've had more luck building a better team from inside than hoping to find the right replacement for a recalcitrant employee. After all, you still have to train that new recruit. Before we get to our interview with Bob Stonehill, let's pause for a word from our sponsor. FDMC Magazine is your vital source of information to improve your woodworking business, whether it is keeping you apprised of the latest advances in manufacturing, helping you solve your wood technology problems with Gene Wengert, or inspiring you with case histories about successful businesses and best practices. FDMC Magazine is there to be the sharpest business tool in your shop. Learn more and subscribe for free at woodworkingnetwork.com/FDMC. Now let's meet Bob Stonehill. Our guest today is Bob Stonehill, General Manager of Fixture World in Baxter, Tennessee. Welcome to the Woodworking Network podcast, Bob.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, that's great. Now, I gather the woodworking industry is a relatively new thing for you, but you have a background in lean manufacturing and engineering management. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So yeah, this is a new industry for me, although, I've been around parts of it and it always interests me. My background for about 30 years has been the printing industry, and some iterations of that, including secure plastic card or credit card manufacturing, as well as packaging.
Interesting. Now, I understand you also have written an ebook called Constructive Culture. What was that about?
Well, actually, like all the successful things in life, I drifted into it, sideways. I had never intended to do that, but what I found out in my career was that how much culture and the proper environment had to do with business success and why it was so often ignored. So, I mean, a preamble to that would be when I was at Fiserv, which is well, amongst other things, they do secure credit card manufacturing. And I was there for 13 years as the VP of operations. So just to give you a little background, I'm certified lean Six Sigma black belt. And I did a lot of my certification at University of Tennessee. However, I needed to fill or backfill a position at work, and I wanted a recent grad that was from that methodology. So I ended up talking to a professor at Vanderbilt who was teaching a systems design engineering course to engineering students of all backgrounds. And I had breakfast with him, and he was rather excited on I guess, my personal philosophy, and he asked me if I would be so kind as to lecture to his students for the systems design course. And frankly, I ended up doing it for 8 years every semester. And early on, he challenged me because some of the things I was talking about were unique. And he said, you ought to write your own book. And jokingly, I guess, but I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you write the intro, I'll write the book. So I actually ended up writing an ebook. And interestingly enough, this was 11 years ago. And I could tell you no one was talking about it. And now I find that that's all people are talking about. And I feel vindicated. So the book title is Constructive Culture, the Forgotten Business Metric. Now, while we could all agree culture is not a business metric, I would tell you that if it's not properly constructed and properly seeding the environment, you will notice every aspect of a bad culture in every line item in your P&L.
Oh, absolutely. I've done some consulting, and for several years, I worked closely with Gero Sassenberg, a well-known consultant specializing in manufacturing of European-style cabinets. Always, it seemed, the biggest stumbling block we had in a lean transformation was getting all the employees on board and banishing the old, we've always done it this way
Oh
attitude.
yeah.
Why is that so hard, Bob?
Well, it's so hard because for a number of reasons. First of all, I think that a lot of people who have been somewhere for any length of time, when they hear process improvement or change, they immediately think they're losing their job. Hey, we're going to discover you're not really doing a whole lot, and I think that sets in this defensive nature that people just naturally have. If I could, I'd like to relate to you a story about walking into Fiserv, because although I knew the printing industry, I did not know the plastic card industry and had more to do with actual manufacturing of widgets to a certain degree in the process than what I was used to. So I came into that entity of Fiserv, which is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They bought out a small company that was a mom and pop, and that was where I ended up going. And I took over for a guy who was rather dictatorial in style. And his methodology was everybody had to come to him for the answers. And nobody was really challenged with thinking of things on their own. So I'm probably the antithesis of that. I came on board and I thought, what I saw was an inordinate amount of waste. I think their waste was like in the 30% range. They were overproducing, over inspecting to ensure quality, which was backwards. But I had to be very careful because what I didn't want to do is come in like I have all the answers and stop. And the other thing is when you talk change, which is a dreaded word, I don't use change. I speak more in terms of evolvement. So what I mean by that is change denotes stop doing that. Here's what you're going to do now. And, you know, everybody will put up a defense and make sure that doesn't work. And it usually doesn't. But when you talk evolving a process, we're all evolving, and it denotes a higher level of consciousness when you evolve. So, what I did was I had a town hall meeting with about 200 people. I put up on the screen for a tenth of a second a optical illusion that luckily they weren't familiar with, which is a wine goblet in black with two faces in reverse in white that form the goblet. And I put it up there for a tenth of a second. And I said, what did you see? Well, everybody, focuses on the black image first. And primarily that was what I heard. And then some people were dissenting and said, no, I saw faces. So I let them argue about it. And then I put it up on the screen and I left it there. And the conversation shifted to, well, now I can't unsee that. And geez, how come I never noticed it before? So I utilized that as a segue to get into, let me tell you what I see that's going on here, but I need your help to fix it. So we started on a path of team problem solving where we could. I allowed them, what I would do was I'd form a team of maybe 2 or 3 people that were directly involved in the problem. And then I'd pick somebody from a different area, had absolutely nothing to do with it. Maybe didn't even know the process. The reason for it was I wanted to stretch the boundaries of the team because I'm a firm believer in the more of an expert you think you are, the less likely you're going to listen to other people's viewpoints. Well, the year that we embarked on this, and it empowered them and energized them. The year that we did that, we recognized an additional $2 million to our net operating profit without any increase in revenue. So wow. That was the beginning of this epiphany for me. And how do I get people to, buy into things? And so what I likened it to was, and I use metaphors quite a bit to, because I know when I speak to 5 people, I'll get 8 different versions of what I said coming back to me. So
yeah,
right. So the metaphor is, you go on vacation to Hawaii, you see a beautiful plant that you want for your own, you bring it back home, you put it in the ground in Connecticut, and in a couple of days it dies. Well, you did not properly seed the environment. And, it needed the soil, it needed the nutrients, it needed water, it needed light. So to purely, and a lot of leaders do this, the buzzword is lean, the buzzword is Six Sigma. So we're going to get a guy that knows that, plug him in, and either as a consultant, which, I would tell you 85 to 95% of these efforts fail because they get a guy who parachutes in, tells them what their problems are, and then leaves.
Right.
And so, people need to be engaged, and the people at the ground level are the ones that drive the process of renewal and change.
Well, I think that paying attention to the people who are actually doing the work can often provide you the answers of what you need to solve those problems and make improvements.
Exactly. So what we have are, and many times I've come into a leadership position where I go into a facility that's already there. And what I find is these people might have made suggestions at one point or another to a supervisor. And how the supervisor gets his job is he's really a good machine operator. He's been there for a while. He's good in production. He might even be a production manager. He's made that ascension based on the fact that he's got technical skill, but he doesn't have people skill. And what tends to happen is he doesn't listen to the people that make the suggestion because, they see the stupid things going on every day. And after a while, they sort of just check out and collect a paycheck. So, now they're disengaged, and now you've created or you facilitated an us versus them mentality unknowingly. So I have, and I put this in the book, but I've lectured to a couple of national organizations, one being the Printers Group of America, Printers Institute of America, the PIA. And this thing went over really big, and they all wanted a copy of it. But I devised a questionnaire. I interview everybody that I have recognized as stakeholders in the overall running of the facility. And they might, they all have different backgrounds. And I've devised this questionnaire that will give me some insight to their perspective on what's going on. I do it on a one-on-one basis, so I don't hand it out in mass because I don't want them comparing answers. So if I could digress for a second, I'll read you some of the questions that are on. There's maybe 5 questions that I have in this, but this is part of the interview. The first question is, name the top 3 issues that are facing the facility from your perspective. Then when I get their answers, my follow-up is very telling because I'm now going to ask them, how do you view your role in helping to solve the problems that you just raised? So it takes them from being a complainer to looking at how they view their role into helping solve the issues that they've raised. And that makes them part of the change or the evolvement that needs to take place. And then I ask them, what are the top 5 duties that you are doing in order of importance? And a lot of times it clues me into things that aren't even their job. They're doing things and maybe spending time on things that are, wasting time. And then I ask them also, if you weren't in your current role, what else would you be doing working here? And that kind of tells me sometimes people are in the wrong position and might have a skill set somewhere else where they can benefit. I also ask them, how can I accomplish your goals? And that gives me insight maybe into some frustrations into previous leaders that, that maybe they viewed something that they could help into solving some of these issues. And now I'm getting it from their view. And also, what would you suggest in my role that I would do, in your opinion, that would result in improvement? Because if I'm asking them to go through this change, I need to go through it with them. But so what this does is, this is properly seeding your environment. I'm interviewing them, I'm giving them a level of importance, but I'm also giving them the opportunity to vent. And you would not believe how important that is. Some of the things that I do, I walk around, I get involved, I'm out there. And I get to know the people that need to be patted on the back and the other ones that need to be kicked in the behind to motivate them. But I'm also listening. Communication is the one theme that comes across so often as a problem. But a lot of leaders and a lot of people don't realize that communication is also listening. And if you don't listen, and not just listen for the opportunity to speak, but listen and take notes on what is important to these people. And when they see certain low-hanging fruit get remedied, I was out on the floor early on at another job, and somebody came up to me and they said, "Bob, what do I do about this problem?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think?" Well, they were quite astounded by that reply and said, "Well, nobody's ever asked me." And I said, You've been here 10 years and nobody ever asked you? No, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I said,
Yeah.
and if I do that, I have a bunch of people that can't think for themselves. So within that, you have to allow some area for them to fail, because failure in itself is only a part of success. It's the learning aspect of success. And growing up, when your parents gave you that leeway, you would learn something, but a lot of times they would say to you, do it because that's what I told you. And
Yeah,
they wouldn't
because I
do it
said
all.
so.
Right, because I said so. And that was frustrating for me. But I discovered when I came up with that answer, it stuck. And then it became part of my life. And then I would not hear those famous replies of, well, we're doing it this way because that's the way we've always done it. Or they would do it for a short while and they go back to what they've always done. They were a part of the change, the new process, and those were the things that were the successful lean methodology, uh, you know, uh, situations that we found ourselves in, and we would solve problems that way.
So, what do you do when you get somebody who just won't be flexible at all and doesn't contribute and is bucking every effort you've got to try and encourage them to to be part of the lean transformation?
Right.
What do you
Great.
do?
All right. Well, there are a couple of things. So, number one is I found that most people that are a problem, at some point, they're going to hang themselves, and it's not going to be you that fires them, it'll be them. So, what I do is and going through this process that I just identified for you, I recently interviewed somebody who was telling me how they've allowed themselves to let go of a lot of things that have gone on in here. They were very aggressive in the interview. They were yelling at me. And I very calmly said, do you realize that you're yelling at me? Now, I know you need room to vent, but this is, oh, really? I didn't realize it. Okay. Well, there are people at any company that will be the one who is the most outspoken and negative. And no matter what you do, they're going to find a way to make sure it fails. And there are usually three or four or so other people that believe the same way that latch onto him, but they're not vocal. So they use him as that vehicle. So what I'm going to tell you doesn't make any sense, but it works sometimes. I make them the leader of a problem solving team. So now they're the ones that don't want to hear the negativity, and they're the ones that don't want anybody pulling in the other direction. Sometimes it works, and they have now baked in the success of the team that they're running. If you've given them that opportunity and still they're the negative ones, then you need to make a decision on cutting them loose. And what I would tell you is part of this process that I've mentioned to you is also you need to establish best practice for every piece of equipment and every process. And you do that by pulling in the stakeholders, documenting what this one does, what that one does, coming up with something they all can all agree on to eliminate the variation. Now you've written and documented work instructions, a new process. And if somebody leaves because they're a problem or they've caused a problem, they're a lot easier to replace.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now at Fixture World, you're dealing with a company that has a lot of history. Had they already adopted lean manufacturing, or is it new to them?
Well, I'm gonna preface this reply by telling you I was here. Now I've only been here. This is my third week. Okay,
Yeah.
so and I've already. I'm totally in love with this opportunity. God bless Horace Burks. He's the owner. He is the founder of the company. Um, I think he sees himself maybe in a situation where He's built this up and he wants to let go a little bit and he wants to feel confident with the people that he has to take over at some point. The third day I was here, I'm having a conversation with him in his office. He hands me a periodical, and which I have here, and strangely enough, it's FDMC. And so I open it up, and on page 8, there's this article that says Technology, Tradition, and Change. And there's your inset picture. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is not really happening. Well, I read the article, and these are the kinds of things, that when I hear folks such as yourself, there are a few others I've done podcasts on and leadership roundtables that are now saying the things that I have been saying, and that I'm very passionate about the subject. I read your article, and I got 3/4 of the way through it, and I was fighting with myself on whether I should reach out to you or not.
Well, I'm glad you did, Bob.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad I did, because frankly, I thought, hey, you just got here. This is something brand new. I don't want to go off, in a new direction. But like, I almost found myself, like going through the motions of contacting you and hesitant on whether I should hit the send button. Thank goodness I did that. And very shortly thereafter, you responded to me, because I thought, he's probably not going to respond to me, or maybe it'll take a couple of weeks. Sure enough, it was like right away. And I thought, oh my, well, for me, what it's like, Will, is, you are living in some place where everybody speaks your language. And then you go somewhere where nobody speaks your language, and you bump into somebody that actually speaks your language. So I was immediately drawn to that. And yeah, so I felt, and I was interviewing. Before this job, I was hired to run 3 packaging manufacturing companies, or 2 companies at three sites on the West Coast. And shortly after I got there, I realized that it wasn't for me, because the culture, and it was very difficult to work in that environment. And I ended up resigning shortly after I got there. And I went for a year trying to find another job. And I thought, well, I'm getting up there in years. Maybe it's because of my age. But I thought, I have so much I can offer somebody. And luckily, this was kind of in my backyard. It was an hour and a half from where I was living. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to reach out to some other industry. Maybe someone will see the worth that I have to bring to this company. There are a few people here that have the mindset of lean. And shortly after I got my certification in Six Sigma, I realized that what worked for me when I got it was the DMAIC tool set within the lean structure. And that's what I found, that I've been able to customize that, but I'm teaching that to the folks here. They already know from a lean perspective, waste, non-value added steps, and using a DMAIC tool set to discover that. So my third week, I already fixed a couple of issues out on the floor, and I'm getting involved in everything, but I'm like a kid at a candy store. I'm learning everything that I possibly can. And I'm also, nothing is documented. There are no metrics. So it's like, what? We don't know what our waste is. We think we know what our waste is, but I took one incident and it grew exponentially from there to discover that our waste is really 3 times what the owner thinks the waste is. And I'm coming up with a way to, cut that, lean out the process. And I was seeing, we do custom work, but I was seeing the variation from one operator to another. And because nothing is documented, no work instructions, it's a chasm between operator A and operator B.
Right.
And we're doing rework because it doesn't pass the muster. So I'm trying to document these things and train them to the documentation. And then I can hold them accountable because you signed off on what you were trained on. And this is best practice. And this is what we're all doing. But we've got guys that are, in their 50s and 60s. And, so we're looking for that new workforce that's trainable, that things are documented. So, yeah, I love it. But I also love consulting. And anytime I get a chance to talk to somebody like you, I feel blessed because you know all these things. And, so for you to raise the question of how do you deal with change, it's like, oh, yeah, that's $1 million question. And man, I can give you an earful.
Well, I've been involved with lean manufacturing since I first met Shigeo Shingo, one of the founders of the Toyota production system, way back in 1984. So I know this is not really anything new.
Yes.
But, I also know that the wood industry has been slower than others to adopt it. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's, as I said, it's changed. So what I'll tell you is this has to begin as a top-down effort. And then it has to flow as a bottom-up effort. It won't work in either direction. So what we have are leaders that got to be leaders because of their great financial prowess and possibly their great technical skill. They lack people skills. So because they lack the people skills, this is viewed, when you start talking culture, it's viewed as a hand fingers quote here, soft skill. And it's not given very much credence. And I think what ends up happening is a way to remedy it is to hire somebody that has those skills and let that be their job. So it'll fall onto HR, it'll fall onto maybe some leaders out on the floor who have the people skill, but this is where I find the biggest disconnect. And we want to reduce waste, so their way of doing it becomes dictatorial and they're not engaging the workforce. Then there are the leaders that want to engage the workforce and they find consultants like you or me or somebody else that has that other side of the skill, but they need to teach it to the leaders. The leader needs to be well-rounded in technical skills, financial skills, and people skills. They're equally as important. And as I said to you, you might find the companies that are very successful, they might have the middle managers that have the people skills, and they're the ones that start the effort. But if they're not getting the support from upper management, it's not going to work. It might be short term, but the culture needs to be something baked in where you're living, what is it that the doctrine that they set for themselves. And, there are words that they use to say, this is the type of company that we are. And unless they're walking the talk, they're just words.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people see that and they become disengaged. Now your job is harder. You get that, well, we tried it and it failed. Well,
yeah.
So that's the way we've always done it. Well, we tried it and failed. Now you've got to overcome that to win them over. So, hey, I came in here, I realized that this is a tough culture. I'm going to be the agent of change. The people on the floor, what I did was, and attention leaders that are out there, we're still handing out checks. We don't do direct deposit yet. I'm going to get them to change that. So I took their checks and I walked out on the floor and I introduced myself and I handed them a check and I said, just want you to know how much you're valued here. I really want to thank you for everything you do. I hear how great of a job you do, and I just want you to know that I know that, and we all know that. Well, you should have seen the look on their faces. And they said, I've been here in 25 years. Nobody ever told me that. I said, well, I'm here to change it, and I want you to know that I appreciate you. So that costs the company nothing, but it goes a long way. When people, maybe they're not getting the best dollar that they're getting, but if they're working and knowing that somebody cares about them and values them. So as a leader, you need to show some amount of vulnerability, that you're empathetic to what they do every week. And if you don't do that, it becomes an us versus them. And it'll never be, you're the carpet dweller. Okay. They're out in the field. They're the ones, maybe they don't have air conditioning out there and it breeds animosity. So you need to close the gap.
Absolutely.
So I brought in donuts for everybody. I made sure that the folks out on the floor were the ones that got it first, and we're going to do a cookout on July 4th. I'm going to ask the ownership to give me an extra half hour so the folks get an hour. And what will really be telling, because I'm a servant leader, is I'm going to be part of the leadership group that serves the people the food that they're going to eat, and we're going to take an hour for lunch and enjoy it, and that'll be our contribution to how we care about them.
That sounds really great, Bob. Now, your ebook, is that still available on
Yes.
Amazon? Okay, and it's called Constructive Culture by Bob Stonehill.
Yes.
And look for it on Amazon.
Thank you.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation, and we may revisit this another time. I want to hear how your progress at Fixture World is, and we'll keep in touch.
I can't thank you enough. So the full title of the book, for the shameless plug, is Constructive Culture, the Forgotten Business Metric. So anyway, I'm still there. I'm not making a whole lot on it. I really don't care, but I get the opportunity to speak to you and certainly all your listeners. So thank you so much.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Take care.
That's it for today. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again to today's sponsor, FDMC Magazine. If you have a comment or topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.